Yeah, so thank you for coming to my kind of second talk. This will be a bit more like workshop, going a bit more into code and showing it. So I had another talk yesterday, which was more high level on how how large language models are changing how we might do data science in the future. And then I ended up showing a bit on how you can combine OpenAI with Streamlit to build some kind of an interesting LLM apps. And today's talk will be a bit more practical. And maybe first, another very quick introduction for the people who didn't join yesterday. What is Streamlit? So myself, I'm working at a US company called Snowflake. That's a database company or a data platform nowadays. And before I worked at Streamlit, which was a small startup, we got acquired. And Streamlit is an open source tool to, like as it's written here, it's the fastest way to build and share data apps. And what it is basically you write your Python script, you install Streamlit as a library, it's open source free, anyone can use it. You use some commands, and you, in addition to the logic you have in your script, it could be a data science app or whatever you want to do, you get another kind of nice looking website that's automatically started. And Streamlit itself offers lots of different kind of elements, components, which you can use, like charting, sliders, buttons, and so on. Maybe I will also click later on our API reference, where you can see what all the things that you can use in your script and then also embed in your kind of interactive app. And it's very well integrated with a lot of different tools that exist in Streamlit. Basically, you can use any Streamlit any Python open source tool, like the visualization libraries like Plotly, Alter, or of course Pandas, TensorFlow, PyTorch. Everything in this ecosystem works very well with Streamlit, and you can build whatever you like. So monitoring apps, apps for doing data analysis, apps for exploring data, for doing all kinds of stuff, because we have a lot of different kind of widgets. So how does Streamlit work in the background? So once again, we're going back to this kind of simple script you see on the left side, where all you do here with Streamlit is you import it. Pandas, for those who don't know it, Pandas is, I think, the most common way to handle data in Python. It's like a table library that has a lot of different commands. One of them is like you can easily load data from a CSV file, which is done here. That's nothing Streamlit specific, but like in the next line here, you have this st header kind of command, which is that's the first thing that does something on the front end you get here. So it's adding this header, hello Snowflake. And on the next line, you have this line chart command, which takes the data frame we previously loaded, this table of data, and visualizes it in a chart. So, and in the background, Streamlit kind of, like this is your script you're writing. And then you start it with Streamlit. It's called, you just say Streamlit run, and I will show that later on in a more practical example. But then in the background, we are kind of running this thing in a loop, or that's like a simple explanation. And whenever there's an event called rerun, we will just run your script, and everything is pushed to the front end. And how that works is Streamlit has basically the backend part, which is a server which runs your script, and then it has a front-end implementation, and both those parts communicate through a WebSocket connection. And whenever there is like a Streamlit command, like st header for showing this hello Snowflake header, we push a forward message to the front end in a It's serialized as a protobuf, but that's not so important. But we push a message to the front end, and the front end can also communicate back to the back end. So in this example, we are actually pushing 2 elements to the front end. First, the st header, which is a text element, and after that, a chart element, the line chart. And then there's a single kind of type of method that can be sent back from the front end to the back end. That's called a rerun message. And it gets more, I will get to that in a minute with widgets, because that's where the interactivity comes in. So you don't only have like things where you can display some sort of stuff in Streamlit, like header or line chart. You also have interactive elements like sliders, buttons, text inputs, and so on. And like here's an example. There's a slider added, and now you can move it, and something changes. It's rerunning your code. So you see here is a slider, down there is an STWrite, which kind of takes the return value of your slider and prints it. So what's happening in the background is the latest value will be sent back to the Python backend. Your script will be rerun with this value, and you will get new kind of elements sent to the front end with the updated state. So here's an extension to our previous script. So in that case, we just added a select box, which is this element here. So you can say, in this case, it's configured to allow the user to select any of the columns in this kind of data frame. And once you, and you can select it, and then this data frame is filtered, so that it's only visualizing a single kind of column and not all the columns in this data frame. And that's here the widget. That brings in the interactivity. So, and when we look again at this kind of execution model here, we have an additional kind of element that's sent to the front end, which is a select box widget. The front end kind of renders that as well. So that's like header, select box, line chart. And so whenever you do a change to this select box, this value, whatever you selected, will be sent back to the backend. Your script will be run again with this changed value, and on it goes. So that's kind of how it works in the background in a simplified way. You as a user, you don't really have to kind of, it's good to know how it kind of works, but then I mean, we are taking over all the front-end part, all the sending of packages and so on. So you only can focus on writing your script. And we have way more also in the background, way more other things, utilities to make it easy to build data apps, to build LLM apps and so on. We have caching things that take on automatic caching of your functions so that you never run things twice. We have other utilities to handle your secrets, and so on, so that you can basically build full-fledged, somehow also scalable applications. So, and you can like Streamlit, you can run it yourself, you can deploy it yourself, and so on. There's a Streamlit, something called Streamlit Cloud, which is completely free. You just select your GitHub repository, your script, you run it, and it's deployed. You can share it. For public apps, it's completely free. We don't have anything for private apps in Streamlit Cloud. That's because we got acquired, and all our kind of actual business stuff happens within Snowflake. That's the database. Streamlit gets integrated into there, and you can like Snowflake customers can use kind of Streamlit within Snowflake. But like the open source, we are still heavily investing in the open source part, and everyone can use it however you like. Okay, let's go one step further into how that actually helps you to build LLM apps. And one part here is Streamlit. Since Streamlit works great with all the Python tools and all the things that come out on how you can kind of integrate those large language models have some kind of Python interface nowadays, though it also works great with things like the OpenAI Python client. And you can easily build very interesting apps with it. And I mean, that's something from my talk also yesterday, going back to that way, that I believe that somehow language will be a very important part in a lot of those kind of, in the way how we do data science, how we do explore data. You have all those tools with SQL, Excel, and so on, but eventually they will be powered by much more language, that people can't just use their local language to query stuff, to ask for visualization and so on. And it would end up in a kind of setting where the data scientist writes like this LLM app for a certain maybe data set, database related to a client. But then the client can kind of request his changes, other visualizations, so it gets way more flexible for the client because he can't just use his normal language to maybe get another dashboard, get another result from his database. And how it usually works in the simplest case is you have a prompt, you have the large language model, a very sensitive prompt. You could have somehow also to inject into your request with the LLM your data, and then the LLM is returning results. Issue here is in most cases that you are limited by how much text you can send to the large language models. So usually it's maybe something around 4,000 to 15,000 words. So you cannot just give all your data to the large language model. You somehow have to be more creative on how to resolve that. So one way to do that, and that's actually what I will show in a small app, which I will then also go into the code, is you only send a certain data profile, a few selected like statistics on your data and so on, so that maybe it's only like if you describe your data, it's only 2,000 words. So it easily fits in. And then the kind of large language model generates a script. It could be SQL, Python, and so on, which can run on your full data. And then basically when you run it, you get the results on your full data, not just like this kind of data profile. And that's basically what we are gonna do. If someone wants to also directly try it out, you can basically do everything I'm showing here as well. But you have, we really recently released a new kind of widgets and elements for doing chart stuff, and that's not yet released in the main version, but in the nightly version. So everything I'm showing here is only nightly, something like that. It's only available in the Streamlit nightly. If you install the latest one here on your computer, like basically you only need like a normal Python environment somewhere on your laptop, then you can pip install Streamlit nightly, and then you will have the latest version, and you can replicate. And I will also share this code maybe. It's actually open source, whatever I share here. So let's jump into yeah. So what I showed yesterday, and that's a bit more complex. We will go through the code in a slightly more easier or simpler application. But what I showed yesterday is this ChatGPT app, which basically you can upload any data or select one of those toy data sets here. It sends it to the LLM. And I can actually also. Oh no, it's not in here. Okay. Do I have internet? Yes. Okay, that's not all. Anyways, so you load some kind of data, and here what you get back is already from the large language model. It's analyzing your data, it's creating descriptions of kind of all the columns, and that's the interpretation from the data. So the LLM kind of gets a data profile, and that's what I wanted to show. here. So let's load that again. So now we are, so we are like you're loading some data, and it's creating a certain data profile which fits into this limit of 4,000 tokens, which if you look in the background, what's actually communicated to the large language models. So it's in the background, it's a conversation. But the conversation isn't the same as you see on the screen. It's something that happens in the background, and here you actually see it's first instructing the LLM to be a helpful assistant for a task, though that it should be able to describe data. It gets in some data from a pandas data frame, and it should provide all like the descriptive information as a JSON. And what I meant with data profile before is I'm not taking all the data like as a text format, sending it there, because it would be way too much. So I'm actually doing like some selections of features which I think would be enough to explain the data set. And the first part is basically describing the types of data. I have this kind of, it's not very easily to grasp it from here. Maybe I'd zoom in a bit. But yeah, here it's just, it has all the columns in the data set with a type, like string or float and so on, and how many missing values are in there. That's like this first part here. Then it's a data sample, which is just like, I think, 10 random samples from the full data set. Yeah.
Where are you doing this stuff? What's the website?
I mean, I can share that this is a Streamlit app I built, deployed on Streamlit. Yes, that's fully what I built, and I will show in a minute how it's kind of built in the background. But yeah, this one is deployed. You actually can go there on this URL, try it out yourself. But yeah, it contains like just 10 examples, full examples from the code, and here is also some statistics. So for all the numerical columns, it calculates like the mean, min, max, average, and so on, and puts it in here as well. I think this data set only has like latitude and longitude as numerical columns. So, and then I'm instructing him exactly how I want his result, his answer to look like. And this is this JSON template. I'm saying I want to have a data description, like what the data set is about. That should be in this kind of data description property, and then he should print it out. And what it returns is exactly this JSON. It's a data description with a description about the data set that comes from the LLM. It has like descriptions for every column, and some observations and some charting ideas. The charting ideas are basically, this app is about creating charts on the data. To make it easier, I just asked it to give me his top 4 chart ideas. Yes, and that's basically the communication in the backend. That's what I'm sending. That's the JSON is what's coming back, and then based on that, I'm constructing. And that's with Streamlit. I'm constructing this message. So here you see again the description. That's something I'm just adding that doesn't come from the LLM model itself. And then I'm printing out a data frame. That's again an element in Streamlit. So you can actually edit that if there would be like something wrong with the description. You could improve it here, and then the visualization tool will be a bit better. And here we have like the charting ideas. And when I click anywhere, it will run this. I can also like just type in any other thing I want to have visualized on this data set, but I selected one of the charting ideas. It will again start a conversation with the model, and in the background it's looking quite similar. I'm instructing him in this time to kind of create Python functions for data exploration and visualization, so a bit of a different kind of goal. I'm providing again this kind of data profile which you saw before, and then I'm instructing him to create a data visualization function with Plotly. Plotly is one of the famous libraries, but to make it even less error prone, or to make it more stable, I'm giving him a kind of a full template on how this function should look like that I expect to get back. And the funny thing is, before I'm actually asking him to create the data, I'm doing another step where I just asked for some kind of descriptive information about the task I have asked. So I mean, I just selected one of the ideas, but if I type in anything, then he actually creates a title for my task. He creates a method name, and he creates a better kind of description. So how he would interpret it. And that even improves like the next steps because that's easier to understand for the model than my actual description I typed in. And an emoji, that's also fun. So he creates, based on the task, he just selects some emojis. That's what I instructed him. So yeah, and this information I'm using for this template here, I'm giving in so it always takes in a data frame. It should return a Plotly chart. I paste in the description here as a comment, in a docstring comment here. And here I enforce like some imports. It should use Plotly because that's what I want back. I also added some imports here so that he exactly knows what he should use or what he can use. And then I'm also once again instructing he should fill out the placeholders. So like I just added, and it could be any other placeholder format. I just added it this way. And I say he should only like write this part of the code, and he should return only the code, no other kind of language. If you are normally doing that in ChatGPT, he will mostly add some text and say, oh, I have now found a solution, whatever, and then the code, but it's not useful for this application here. And that's exactly what I'm getting back. It is this code with an implementation. For the task I have asked, I get here again the generated code, and then I have my implementation here. And in this more advanced version, I can now go on and say, make it red. I can basically apply any modification to this chart. It's taking the current version, it's taking the instruction, creating a new function, applying it, and hopefully I get it back. Yeah, a more kind of fun with that, which I also showed yesterday. Let's maybe go back. So the passcode here is, if anyone has opened that app, is just ChatGPT. So yeah, I'm loading that again. So you can also do more advanced things. Actually, also one advanced thing, you can not only use bar chart or line charts, you can use maps. And that was what I was showing yesterday. I printed all the airports here from this data set on a map. And then here's actually print show all. Yeah, 1 second, airports on a map. So now I have done my kind of instruction. Once again, it selected this nice kind of emoji. This is what like the model kind of thought, that it's the most closely related, and the title. It generated some code. Oh, but yeah, here you see an example where it didn't follow my instruction because it actually didn't return anything. Let me instruct it, please return the Plotly object. Let's see if it, so you can like just continue the conversation on this chart. It once again gets the previous code, it applies it. Okay, no, it has returned something, but it's not. Okay. Like that are things that can happen here. For example, no, it determined that it would be good to use like a tool in the background called Mapbox, but apparently, I mean, that's not a valid Mapbox token, so I'm not getting an actual map here. But yeah, maybe an easier way to do it is just a scatter plot. Yeah. So And I mean, I can even go deeper. I can like make interactive visualization where I have some selection boxes, can select different kind of categories and then visualize this data. So it goes quite deep. So in that case, it's just a scatter plot, but now I can go and say something like show it on a globe, which is fun. So let's wait that, and then I'm jumping into the code. So you know you have now a globe showing that, and yeah, you can go on and on. Add a marker for Yerevan, and then he adds a marker here, and so on. Whatever you like to have for visit. And the nice thing is you have the code, so you can directly use it for your whatever you are building. Maybe a dashboard, maybe another app. So let's go into the code here. So I mean, I wrote a bit simpler version to show it, and it's actually, it only takes, it doesn't have this kind of modification feature and so on. It only has a generation feature, and in total, it's still not. It's 400 lines of code, which is, let me show that as well. It's looking like the same app, but with a bit less kind of. So it only lets you select a toy data set. It then only prints out a single idea, and you cannot modify it. You can only like ask for new charts. That's kind of this app, and that fits into 490 lines of code. I mean, it's still a lot, but maybe let's start from some simple patterns. So let's comment that out for a minute. We don't need that for now. So, yeah. Oh, yeah, bigger. Yes, that's a good point. Is it better like that? Okay, perfect. Yeah.
Maybe I missed that part, but which version of ChatGPT it is, and is it a Barcamp version or the original?
So what I'm using here in the background, so in this first version, you can actually select the model from the API. So here you can select that are the main models. It's GPT 3.5 Turbo, which I'm using here because it's a lot faster, but it's less reliable. Then there is a new model called GPT 3.4 Turbo 16K. That means that you can fit in 16,000 tokens, so way more. So I can actually give him, for example, with that model, way more data samples. And then there's a GPT-4 model, which I'm not using here because it's slow, but it's way kind of more reliable. It probably wouldn't do this error with selecting this Mapbox API key, for example. But yeah. It's not fine-tuned. It's just the basic thing. Basically, the concept is, in that case, zero-shot learning. I'm just providing him with instructions, and that's enough for the model to actually create nice charts. So it's quite simple on that part. And where did I have that? Yeah, here. Yes. So I don't need. Maybe let's start with a simple building block. So what I showed before is with Streamlit you can just like add a header, and now if I go back to this app and rerun it, that's the only thing that's shown. You can go there and add a text input, and if I rerun this, I now have a text input, and you can go on and on and on. I mean, the actual like interesting part here is a bit more about like actual chat things, and that's what we released quite recently. That's one widget called chat input. So you use it like the text input, but it behaves a bit differently. Or what can I help? So it has a few more parameters. For example, you could like say, oh, I only want to allow the user for maybe 100 chars. I don't know. but yeah, it has more functionalities. But like in the simplest case, you just add it, and now your page has this chat input, which kind of has some nice features. It auto grows and so on. You can put in your prompt and enter, and then it's submitting it, and you can use it. So, and the prompt is actually like whatever the user inputs and then enters, submits, is returned by this function. As the chat input, this one returns either none or a string. So if it's none, then I don't have to do anything. Nothing has happened. But if there is actually st, right? If there's actually a return value, so I'm checking here, then I'm calling write. And no, it's on top of the page. So in the simplest case, I already have something I can put in some instruction, and then I'm printing it out. So the second relevant part here is the chat message itself. So that's where you have this avatar. And that's another command called just chat message. What you do here is you give him, like, every chat message is connected to some kind of name, label, or something like a user assistant and so on. So that's what you have to provide. And then there's an optional avatar. You can override the avatar. There's a default one. You can use emojis, images, or whatever you like. But in the easiest case, a chat message. Now I have like used a chat message for a user. It's empty. I didn't write anything in there. It's showing like that. But since we already have this prompt, I'm doing that here. Whenever the user types in something in the chat input, we get back a prompt, and we want to show that as a user message. That's what the user is writing. So what we do here is this chat message that's another concept in Streamlit. It's a container. That means that you can, with this container, you can use with here. You can run any Streamlit command like I used before, this write. I can kind of write that in this container, and then it's not written like on top of the page or somewhere, but in this chat message. That's basically all. Let's do that. Now we have like my input, and we have like this chat message with the content. I mean, then since like a chat like just alone isn't fun, we can add a response. So once again, it could be assistant, it could be any other name, but like assistant has a kind of default preset avatar in that case. And we are maybe just, as the easiest case here, just responding with the same prompt that we got in. And actually, since you can use any other elements here, you can also random data frame. Let's see what Copilot comes up with. Yeah, that's fine. You can also like display like a data frame inside the chat message. So we use it again. Hello. We get back the message. We get back a data frame here, and we have our first kind of conversation. Yes. So, but now we are kind of we want to use an LLM in any way inside here. So the next part to actually do that is to use the OpenAI API. So that means whenever we have a prompt here, the OpenAI has a Python API. I think that's the most used way to actually access it programmatically. You install OpenAI, and then you have this kind of chat completion. You need to follow a certain format, which is documented in OpenAI, which I can show in a minute. It's looking like that. You have a role. They call it the chat markup, I think, or something like that. You have a role which is in case of OpenAI, it's either user, assistant, or system. Since I'm here, I want to provide him the history. So I want to provide like the prompt we got from the user with a role user, and here we can select the model, which we will just take the 3.5 turbo, I think. This one. We will select a model we want to use, and we are getting back a completion, like a response, which we then want to. So the format can give us multiple responses. So it's a bit more complicated, but that's on the OpenAI side. So we are just selecting the first option of the responses here. And then there's a message object, and there's content objects that has nothing to do with Streamlit. It has to do with OpenAI. And that's basically how we now execute this response. And let me insert it here. Let me remove this random data frame. And let me rerun. Something went wrong. Where is it? What's wrong here? Was not closed. But there is one. Ah, no.
So you use array for messages, is that correct?
Yes, yeah, but okay, yeah, of course. It has to be an array. So what I need to provide in here in this message thing is the history of the conversation. For this simple case, I'm just providing the first user message because that's where I want to have a response. But I have to, that was the problem right now, it has to be in an object notation. And we rerun. I say hello. And I get additional properties are not allowed. What? So I'm not sure. The nice thing is I can just print the full response here. Something, I mean, I have probably selected something wrong here. But let's. I mean, I copied it from below, so I assumed it is. But that's a nice thing with Streamlit. You can. What? Okay.
I think it's content. Content statt text.
Just content.
No, response.
Ah, you're totally right. Sorry. Yes, it's content and not text. So no, it should work. Now we have our first chatbot. So it's now using the LLM. It's returning whatever the GPT model thinks would be the next kind of sentence. And the problem here a bit is I'm not keeping the state. So if I do something else, it will just start from the beginning. And that's exactly where the concept of, let me close this one. That's where we have another concept in Streamlit called session state. So the user, I'm currently the user of this app, and that's what we are calling a session. As long as I don't close this app, I'm in the same session. And in the script, I can store information within the session state. So what I can do here is messages. Not in STs. It's just called session state. And I can check if this object here, messages, is, if it's not saved in session state, I'm creating just an empty list. And that's where I want to store the history of the conversation. And whenever the user does a prompt, we add it. We add this kind of prompt in this format. That's basically what we want to store inside here. So we add this one here to the session state, messages object, which we created here. And whenever there is a response, we do basically the same, just for the assistant. So we save this object here, not like that, like response text, let's call it that way here. And we store it in this history as well. Okay, so now we and up here, we can, like, for now, it still won't like store the state of our conversation. It will store the state of our conversation, but it's not synced with the UI yet. So if we are showing that, if we are printing out the session state, you will see that it now contains an empty message. And if I do something else, it will keep the conversation in here. But it's not synced with the UI, though that's the last task we need to do to have actually a full-fledged chatbot, is to print the history, which means that we now have these messages here. So we are looping through that for message in st messages. And for every message inside here, we are once again using chat message. We are selecting the role from what we store here, and we are writing the content out. And I think if everything works out well here, we have our first, yeah. Now we can actually chat around. How many people live in Yerevan? And we can go on and on and on. It's storing, it's sending. Oh, okay, the last part we are not doing here. We, of course, need to also provide this history to OpenAI. And now, actually, OpenAI also has the history, and so we can go on with this context. For example, in what country is this city? Yeah. So now we have a full-fledged built-in UI for a full-fledged chat app. I mean, it isn't doing more than ChatGPT or like the online app ChatGPT right now, so it's not super useful. But since we have the power of Streamlit with all those different elements, and that's probably a good point to actually go through our API reference. So we have this page here on Streamlit.io. You can scroll through here, and you're seeing all the different elements we are offering. So a lot of different chart types, a lot of different ways. The default like components we have in UIs, text input, which I showed, number input, and so on. File uploader. You can show images, videos, audio, and some stuff for layout. So the power here comes in that you can use all of those things in your script to actually build some kind of optimized chatbot for a certain task. Something like I showed before, like this visualization chatbot. And that's like the next step I'm getting into here. So we built like a very kind of simple way. I don't need that anymore. So I'm now going a bit bigger. I won't be able to cover that line in line, and I think it wouldn't be super useful for you. There's some utility functions which are not super important. What I have here, which I showed before with the prompts, I have for every kind of prompt, I have kind of written down myself, I have a function. So what I showed before in the system message, that's something I have covered here in a function. It takes in a pandas data frame. It applies these kind of tricks to get the statistics, column description, and so on. It applies it here to provide this information to the LLM. So, but I won't go into a lot of details, but here I have written up my prompt. I have written up also, here it's actually a data description. I have defined how I want the data back, all the things you saw, and I'm executing this prompt here. So that's to get like descriptions about the data. The same also happens for generating the code. Here I'm providing this template. You saw that before as well. And the task summary. So, and when we look in here, it's getting like this simpler version I have built here. If I run that again, we are back to the ChatGPT app. It starts basically with something we call form, where you can select and load your data. That's basically this part. You don't really, I will just pick out some aspects. For example, I'm using the select box in this form, which you can see here. I have a button which kind of loads this data, and then after that's done, I'm writing a chat message for the assistant, which is showing this data that was loaded in a data frame. And that's exactly what you will see here if I do that. This is the first message. That's just printing out a message here. So it's a bit of cheating. It's not actually a part of the conversation in the background. But I think that's fine. And it's printing out the data frame. So that's like the first part here. In the second part, I'm going to the first step where I'm generating this data description. And I showed you, I have this method where I kind of define the prompt, where I get back the data actually as a JSON, so I can directly use it. And I'm kind of parsing here the information from the JSON. So here, one step, I'm displaying the column descriptions in the data editor. That's this part here. And then I'm picking up the first charting idea here. So it gives me a list back, but in this simpler example, I only want to have the first charting idea. I'm adding a button. And whenever I press here on this button will return true. In all other cases, it will return false. So when I press it, this button, I want to clear all history. I want to start from scratch. And I set it as like what I call here preset prompt. I said this is now the prompt. Don't use the user input, use this provided prompt. So that's when I go here and click here. It's just directly going to show that as a user input and running all the steps here. Yes, then this part is rendering the chart history. We did the same before in the simpler version. It's a bit more complex here because we not only have text in our history, but we also have like chart objects. But you can do that as well. You can store those chart objects in your session state. That's basically what I'm using here in the background. And I do have this rendering method which takes this chart object from history, shows it in a Plotly chart. So, yeah, okay, perfect. So yeah, like to end, we use the same chat input, and then we print again, like we execute some stuff on the chat input to generate the code here, which is then shown back on the UI, like in the last step. So like it's 400 lines of code, but it already can do a lot. You can generate all kinds of charts on any kind of data set you select. It's quite generic, and it's doable, like to write that in maybe a couple of hours. Yeah, that's it. Yeah. Any questions?
Does Streamlit have any theming options?
Yes. So yeah, we have. So basically, you can provide it programmatically, or like you have these options here. We have a preset theme, like dark theme, light theme. You can edit a theme here. You can provide that as a config. It's limited to certain options. So I can change the primary color here. And now it's using that, for example, here. So you have, it's limited to options, but you have theming.
So the most part of all magic that happens here is that you give super precise prompt that uses as maximum as you can use.
Yeah. Yeah, I think like why this is working here relatively stable is that I'm giving like this model, this GPT model, a very strong kind of restrictions what it should do. And then, I mean, if you just say, hey, generate me some code to make a visualization, then you have a way higher risk that it's actually not working.
So just to give all the context to give the expected result.
Right, yeah.
Okay. Can we have a, is it an open source project that you showed us?
This one, yeah, it's actually on my GitHub. Just my name, and then it's called ChatGPT. I think it should be open source, if I'm not. So yeah, this should be, I believe it's open, yeah, public here. So yeah, so the code, the simple code I showed is in app simple. This is these 400 lines. Yeah, that's the same I showed, but yeah, it's this is a simple code, and then there is like this more like that also allows you the modifications and so on. That's in this just app.py, and that's actually also using some other modules, so that's a bit more split up. And there's a module prompts and a module utils and so on. The URL, I don't know if I can do that, but I can like let me do that, yeah. So yeah, this is.
Did I understand correctly that you store all the queries and responses in a single list and pass it every time to ChatGPT, like our previous conversation?
Like in the example with the text only, I did that, yes. So it will blow up once your conversation is above, you will get an error.
Is it really necessary? Doesn't ChatGPT keep some session on their side as well?
I believe they don't offer that, at least yet, that you can. So I mean, ChatGPT, the web app itself has it built in. But the API, as far as I know, doesn't have this capability yet. So you need to manage this yourself. But like even with this modified chart app, I'm not storing the full conversation. I'm only sending him the last modified code. So it's only working on the last step in that case, so I can always keep it under those token limits.
Arsene, since you have access to messages, you can do whatever you want with that, like programmatically. You can send them to vector store and then choose relevant ones, collect. So yeah, you can do anything you want.
Yeah. All right. I think time is over. If there is a last message, I can maybe still answer that. If not, you're done.